It's 1781, and the American Revolution is hanging on by a thread. I mean, after 6 long, brutal years of war, pretty much everyone is exhausted. But on this one little peninsula in Virginia, a series of absolutely brilliant maneuvers is about to lead to the battle that will secure American independence once and for all. This is the story of that battle, Yorktown.
So you really have to ask yourself, how do you pull this off? For the Continental Army, this was the question. They were up against the British Empire, a global superpower, with one of the most professional armies on the planet. And after 6 years, the Americans were right on the brink of collapse. They didn't just need a win, they needed a knockout blow.
And you know what? That's exactly what they did. The story of Yorktown isn't just about a battle. No, it's the story of a perfectly designed, perfectly executed, continent-spanning strategic trap.
Okay, so why was this trap so absolutely crucial? Well, to really get that, we need to take a look at what the war looked like in 1781. Both sides were desperate, and the whole thing had ground to a brutal stalemate.
The American cause, let's be real, was on life support. They were buried in debt, there were critical food shortages, and morale among the soldiers was dangerously low. But here's the thing, the British weren't exactly having a great time either. They were stuck fighting a global war, not just in America, but against France and Spain too. The war was super unpopular back home, and they really only controlled a few cities on the coast. So both sides were just desperately searching for one big, decisive victory that could finally end it all.
And that brings us to Virginia. This is where 2 generals, one on each side, made a massive gamble. And their decisions were either going to lead to a war-winning victory or a total, catastrophic disaster.
First up, the British gamble. General Cornwallis decides to move his entire southern army to this little port town, Yorktown, which sits on a peninsula. Now, in his mind, this was a genius move. The geography was perfect for defense, he had rivers protecting his flanks, and he could be easily resupplied and reinforced by the all-powerful Royal Navy coming in from the Chesapeake Bay. To him, it was a fortress.
But where Cornwallis saw a fortress, George Washington saw a cage. In what was an incredibly audacious and risky move, Washington and his French ally, General Rochambeau, completely ditched their plans to attack the British in New York. Instead, they secretly started marching their whole army over 300 miles south to Virginia. The entire plan, the whole thing, was this huge bet that hinged on one single critical factor. The French Navy had to show up at the Chesapeake Bay at the exact right time. If they were even a little late, the trap would fail and Washington's army would be stranded.
What happened next was just a masterpiece of timing. I mean, it's almost hard to believe how perfectly it all worked. The jaws of the trap that Washington had dreamed up, they began to snap shut with incredible precision.
And check out how fast this all happens. On September 5th, the French fleet, commanded by Admiral de Grasse, meets the British Navy right at the mouth of the Chesapeake. This was the moment. Everything depended on this. In a huge naval fight called the Battle of the Capes, the French won, completely sealing off Cornwallis's escape route by sea. No reinforcements, no escape. It was over. And then, just about 3 weeks later, Washington's and Rochambeau's armies show up and surround Yorktown by land. The trap was sprung.
So now you have almost 9,000 British troops totally trapped. And this is where the Allies began the slow, methodical, and brutal work of a siege. For 3 straight weeks, they just tightened the noose, day by day. You know, siege warfare back then wasn't just chaos, it was a science. And the Allies had a secret weapon, their French engineers, who were experts at this stuff. So step 1, they dig this huge trench called a parallel to get their big cannons in range. Then, on October 9th, they just unleashed hell, a non-stop artillery barrage that went on for days. Step 3 was to get even closer, so they started digging a second parallel. But there was a problem. 2 small British forts called redoubts were in the way. They had to be taken by force.
So this is it. The make-or-break moment comes on the moonless night of October 14th. The plan is a surprise assault on redoubts 9 and 10, and to be as stealthy as possible, to make sure no one accidentally fires a shot and gives them away, the soldiers were given an insane order. Do not load your muskets. This was going to be a silent attack with cold steel. Bayonets only.
And here's a great little detail from that night. The official password for the attack was Rochambeau, to honor the French general. But the American soldiers, well, they came up with their own, slightly more direct translation. Rush on, boys. And that's exactly what they did. They stormed the defenses in this incredibly ferocious, hand-to-hand fight and just overwhelmed the defenders inside.
Once those last 2 redoubts fell, Cornwallis's position was completely hopeless. Everyone knew it. The end was here, and it was about to change the world forever.
Imagine the scene. It's the morning of October 17th, and suddenly all the cannons go silent. And then a single figure appears on top of the British defenses, a drummer boy, beating the rhythm for a parley, which is the signal that you want to negotiate. A moment later, an officer waving a white handkerchief joins him. The fighting was over.
When General Cornwallis sent his official request to surrender, the message was short, and man was it final. All it said was, "Sir, the dance is over." The long, bloody struggle had finally come to an end.
And the shockwaves from this surrender shot right across the Atlantic. When the news finally reached London a month later, the British Prime Minister, Lord North, reportedly just exclaimed, "Oh God, it is all over, it is all over." He knew in that instant what this meant. The political will in Britain to keep fighting this war had just completely collapsed.
If you really want to see just how decisive this was, you just have to look at the numbers. Allied casualties were pretty light, all things considered. But the British losses were catastrophic. I mean, look at that last column, missing and captured. Nearly 7,500 soldiers. An entire British army was just gone, wiped off the map in a single stroke. It was a total, complete, undeniable victory.
Now, to be clear, the victory at Yorktown didn't officially end the war right then and there. That would take another 2 years of messy diplomacy. But this was the final major military action. This was the killing blow. So that leaves us with one last question. How does a single battle, a perfectly laid trap on a tiny peninsula, become powerful enough to effectively win a war and guarantee the birth of a brand new nation on the world stage?